In episode 6, both Jen and Judy are interrogating Charlie about where he was with that car, and they find out that he was just fooling around with his girlfriend in the car, although they don't know if they were just making out, having sex, whatever. So Jen punishes him by grabbing his cell phone, grabbing his video games, taking the door off of his room, and now she's going to drag him everywhere she goes. And while Jen goes through Charlie's phone, she sees that Parker tagged Charlie in a bunch of Instagram posts. And that's a problem because you see the car and you see a TKG hat in the photo. So Charlie, Jen, and Judy head over to Parker's house, and Jen tries to nicely talk to Parker about taking the post down. The problem is, Parker is a micro-influencer on Instagram, and she just can't take that photo down. She needs a reason to. I.e., she needs money. So Jen pays her off with money she doesn't really have, and Parker agrees to take the photo down. And when Jen gets back in the car, Judy gets a phone call from the Laguna police. Detective Perez has called Judy in because she's obtained Steve's phone records, and he called Judy 8 times the night he disappeared and wants to know what he was calling about. But Judy says, I just sent him straight to voicemail. And Detective Perez pressures her to listen to those voicemails, but they're not pretty. It involves Steve calling Judy a bitch, Steve yelling at Judy. There's even a death threat in there. It's very hostile messages. To the point where Detective Perez says, are you scared for your life? And Judy says, no, I'm fine. But it's definitely upsetting to hear for her. Jen, meanwhile, has dragged Charlie to one of her listings to show Ben. And while it really doesn't fit Ben's scene, he agrees to take it because he just wants to get out of his mother's house so badly. He says how it's nothing but Steve, 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 and they're even thinking about offering up a reward. And when he says that, it piques Charlie's interest, who says, what reward? But Jen just starts yelling at Charlie to just shut up and mind his own business. Ben then gets interrupted by a phone call, and Jen heads downstairs outside to find Charlie smoking and just acting out. She tells him that you're a child, and you should just enjoy being a child, because when you get over here, when you get to the adult side, it's not that much fun. Jen then gets a phone call from Judy, who says the good news is they haven't found the car, but she has to hang up on Judy because Ben has shown up back in the room after his phone call, and he's visibly shaken. Because the police have found remains, and he needs to go down to the Laguna Police Department to figure out if it's his brothers or not. So Jen goes down with Ben to the Laguna Police Department, but they find out that the remains are not of Steve's, they're actually female. And Detective Perez immediately wants to know, how do you two know each other? And they explain that Jen is trying to find Ben a house. When they get back in the car, Ben is kind of overcome with grief because he's accepted the fact that that was going to be Steve, and it wasn't. He also thanks Jen for being a very kind realtor and offers to buy her a drink that night. But she says, no, I can't. I've got to go see this Christian children's choir where my son is having his first solo. And in a not-so-surprising twist, Ben is very familiar with the Holy Harmonies because from 86 to 89, he was one of them. And he kind of self-invites himself to the show. Now, Judy is also planning to go to that show, but before so, she gets tacos with Michelle, and Michelle is once again putting out heavy feelers. But while getting tacos, they run into Nick, who is not doing well post-breakup with Judy. When Judy asks him how he's doing, he says, well, I got out of the house today, so I guess that's a good thing. And this is the first time that Michelle is finding out that Judy is actually straight. She tells Michelle about the love triangle between her, Steve, and Nick, and how she broke up with Nick because she thought she was pregnant with Steve's child, but in fact she wasn't. And Michelle says, yeah, I wanted to have kids, but my ex didn't want to either. And in fact, I'm actually still living with her. I know it's awkward, but I can't just leave her because at this point we're kind of like family. So now it's all out in the open that Melissa's a lesbian and Judy is straight-ish. But she then invites Melissa to go to the Holy Harmonies concert, and they agree. But while they're watching the show, Christopher comes and takes Jen to the side and says Henry's having a problem because Henry doesn't want to go on for his solo. Christopher thinks it's because his dog killed his pet bird, but Jen tells him Adele didn't do that, it was Shandy. And that's a big relief to Christopher. And it's also a relief to Christopher that Henry doesn't want to do the solo because his falsetto just isn't up to par yet. So while Henry thinks that he's going to disappoint his mom if he doesn't do it, Jen says, all right, well, Henry, what do you want to do? And Henry wants to go to the arcade. So that's where everybody heads and they all blow off some steam and have a lot of fun. While they're at the arcade, Jen notices how Ben is interacting with her kids, and they're very comfortable with him. She then goes to Charlie and says, I'm going to put your door back on your room, but just don't have sex. It's the very awkward single mother-son sex conversation that I know all too well. Shout out to my mom. Later on, Jen catches Ben staring at her, and she says, what? And he says, oh, I just remembered. I got to give you the check for the down payment. And she says, I can't let you have that place. I'm not going to make you pay that much money for a beachfront property when you don't even like the beach. You should like the view that you're looking at. And he does, because he's looking at Jen. But those are the only sparks that are flying, because Michelle and Judy have made it into a photo booth, and after taking some normal photos, the two just start making out like crazy. This leads back to Michelle's place, which leads to Michelle's bedroom, where they close the door, and shortly after that, Detective Perez, who it turns out is Michelle's ex, returns home. But unfortunately for Judy and Jen, Judy's handiwork the previous night by lighting Steve's car on fire has been found, of all people, by Nick, who has gone back to the police force. And he's staring at the charred remains of Steve's car. Thanks so much for checking out this recap. If you don't see the next video there, don't worry, it'll be up in a day or two, or as quickly as I can get to it. Please consider subscribing to this channel. It would really help me out. And then like the video if you liked it, and hit thumbs down if you don't.